are the correlations in behaviors, characteristics, and certain hobbies that people have based on the order they were born. So I will be also analyzing outside factors of what might or might not affect the similarities that those people tend to have. Okay, so we're gonna start with a timeline. So to begin with, in the early 20th century, Alfred Adler, he introduced the concept that maybe the order that one was born in could affect one's, could have an impact on one's personality development along with characteristics, and then he later on added to it in the mid-20th century. He said that it did in fact have a reasoning and or impact directly on your personality and your development. And then we see in the timeline in the early 21st century, the areas grew. So not only was the theory that the birth order affected your personality there, but it also had different like stereotypical traits that each student had. Each person had. Okay, so the ongoing research now, we're gonna talk about it later, but it's really like oldest daughters tend to have the same traits, oldest son tend to have the same traits, and regardless of gender, first, second, and third born, I will be discussing because I did have a survey with mostly them. Okay, so to begin with, I do want to clarify that we should all be aware that correlation does not mean causation. So I don't by any means expect anyone to think that the sole reason of why these people have these characteristics is because of the order they were born in. Okay, so a like little description of what the birth order is basically the order which you were born from 1 to 4, like in the picture. So 1 would be the eldest, 2 would be the middle child, and then the only child, I actually didn't have any participants in the study, so we're gonna talk about that later. Okay, so these are like the general stereotypes. So I looked at different research, and all of them basically had the same things in common. So every research, or for the most part, every research that I looked at had that the eldest siblings had those traits right there, and then going forward, there was going forward in the research, there was lots of correlations between the traits and the person's personality just based on the order that they were born in. Okay, so the way that I collected my research, I had surveys, and then I also analyzed other database information, journals, and articles, along with charts and different sources. Okay, so the ways that I assured that my research was going to be ethical was I basically upheld the standard by making sure that the participants knew that they could stop taking the survey at whatever point they didn't want to, whether it was that they didn't feel comfortable or they no longer felt like filling out the survey. Along with that, I made it clear what the intent of me collecting the research was going to be for. And then at some point, I also did ask for parent consent and notified the parents that their student or that their child who's going to be participating in the survey. And then I am now sharing the results and keeping it confidential. So often when we look at family dynamics and people's personalities, we don't look at siblings, even though siblings get to see the most of who you are. Studies show that 82% of adolescents and teens live with at least one other sibling. And that's higher than the statistics for kids that live with their father or father figure at home. So that makes siblings just as good as candidates for family dynamic, if not better than fathers, because more people have siblings than they do fathers. Okay, so what the surveys looked like was a little like that. So here we have like from 1 to 10, giving everybody who was participating in the survey an opportunity to describe and or tag any of their siblings. So I had the survey we called a sibling tag form, which was basically you rated yourself and or your sibling who's more likely to, or which person is the most, or which person is the least this or that. I did not ask for names, so it was basically numbered 1 through 10. And then these are the results. So we have most responsible, nosiest, better decision making, laziest, the most careful, the caretaker of the group, the person always in charge, and most mature. And these were all firstborns. And when I began to look at my data, I was like, maybe I should have prevented bias in a different way, because I solely thought, like wholeheartedly, that most of the people answering these surveys must have been oldest kids, because these are traits that most older kids believe that they have. So actually, when looking at the secondborns, I found that they were the most studious, the most careful. I didn't find, they found, and then I reviewed, that they were the most carefree. They always wanted to win arguments, and they are considered to be the most fun, for the most part. And then on top of that, they did rate that they were also considered to be the most sensitive. Okay, and then here's the side note, because I was gonna say like, oh, maybe I should start over and limit the amount of each person answering the survey. So like maybe 10 eldest, 10 middle children, and 10 youngest. That way the information couldn't be skewed in any way. But actually, I had the most secondborns answer, and this was mostly their input on how they view and perceive the rest of their siblings. Okay, and then for the thirdborn, the only characteristic that all the other siblings thought that they had was that they were the most permissive, which in a way can be interpreted because they're the youngest, so their oldest siblings tend to kind of respect them less, or think that they could get away with doing more to them because of the way that they are. But really it's just the way they perceive them, not just like how everybody in the world perceives them, just how their older siblings personally view them. Okay, so the inconclusive, this was where I either had very similar for 1 or 2 sections. So like for who's the most forgiving, I had 3 of the same. So it was like 3rd, 4th, and 5th borns were the same percentage, and then 1st and 2nd born were the same percentage. And out of 20 responses, I couldn't really say, oh, this person was the most or this person was the least, because it was a tie. So considering that there are ties, and initially when we saw the chart in the beginning, we didn't really see the same characteristics for this, like 2 or more siblings. Okay, so the way that I analyzed the data was that I looked for the overlapping. So the slide before where we just talked about the inconclusive, that was the overlap, and I did find that when there was overlap, it was usually the same percentage closest in age. So like first and second were pretty close, and then third, fourth, and fifth were pretty close. So I wanted to look deeper into maybe why was that. So I couldn't ask the same people the same questions again, or start over with the whole experiment or like the data collection. And I did appreciate that the insights were very honest, because it wasn't just like, oh, I like this trait, I'm gonna pick it. We clearly saw that they were accurately representing and or giving their opinion of their siblings. Okay, so then I looked into attachment theories. So basically, the attachment theory that I looked at was basically saying that a child's interaction with their primary caregivers eventually shapes their social and emotional development, and also it implements to your life later on, because it also causes you to start relationships and or value certain relationships, because those are the relationships that you either longed for or had when you were a child. Okay, so then I looked at parenting styles, and maybe usually for me, from personal experience, my sister and I had the same parents, and then even though my dad and stepmom are still the same people, my younger siblings do not have the same parents that my sister and I grew up with. So I looked at parenting styles, and here I found that basically there's 4 main parenting styles. Obviously, it's not just like it's that parent and that's it. There's definitely, it's not like a scale, one or the other. It's like a bar and you slide it. So basically what I found was that authoritarian parenting was basically low warmth, high strictness, meaning that the child is not really experiencing this sense of support, and on top of that, their parents have high expectations of them. And then authoritative was basically that the parent had high hopes and or high expectations, but the parent also provided the emotional support that the child needed in order for the child to meet certain criteria or expectations that the parents have. Versus permissive parenting and neglectful, they fell under the same category a little bit, in the sense that it was one extreme or nothing at all. So permissive parenting was permissive parenting was high warmth and low strictness. So the parent and child had friend-like relationships. So it was like something that I found very interesting, because doing my research, I remember when I was younger, one of the main lines I would hear is, "I'm not one of your little friends," or "I'm not a friend, I'm your parent," and like that's how it is. So basically permissive parenting is the total opposite from that, and that was new to me. And then looking into that, after I saw the neglectful parenting, which was low warmth, so that parent provided low emotional stimulation for the child, and on top of that, they didn't really set rules or expectations for children. So we might be wondering now, like, where are you taking this? Well, basically, the way that a parent parents their child also affects their relationship with their siblings. So whether the relationship of their siblings is extra close or they find comfort in each other, siblings are still key to family dynamics. Okay, so the importance of siblings in these dynamics is that not only are they a helping hand, or that they are there for you to serve as role models and or see you at like the times you need them the most. Sometimes kids are more comfortable telling their siblings something that they're not comfortable telling their parents. The expectation that a sibling has from you is different than the expectations that parents usually have. So that causes the sibling to have more comfort with their siblings and with their parents. So the input that I was given was very raw in the sense of, oh, this is who my sibling truly is. I also did find that parents don't see the versions of their kids that their siblings see, and or when siblings cover for each other, they're usually closer, and so they, in a way, get to experience versions of a child that no one else sees. Okay, and then I didn't put a slide on this, but basically what I wanted to say was that in all my findings, one thing that did correlate, well, there was a few, but one of the main things that correlated was that siblings aren't just holding the traits that they stereotypically are perceived or expected to hold, like we saw in the chart in the beginning. So in this chart, we saw these traits, but siblings all hold like a blend of these traits, and it's because they learned from each other. So that leads me to believe that not all the stereotypes or the stereotypical expectations of these children are true, because they learned from each other, and it bleeds into who they are as a person and who they long to be. And then these are my works cited.
Thank you.
Okay. What was one obstacle or challenge you encountered while implementing your research method, and how did you address it?
I actually had a few. So the first one was that not everybody wanted to participate in the surveys, and then how I addressed it was that I kept looking for either teachers to post it on their Google Classrooms so I can have more kids be exposed to it, and I got 20 respondents out of like 10, 15 teachers that posted it in their Google Classroom, so that really wasn't a lot, but it was something. And then another problem that I had was that there was different family sizes, so some siblings had 3, 4 siblings, and then that they were the youngest, while as others there was just 3. So I would, like, in the future, if I were to do anything like this again, I would make sure that all the family sizes were the same. That way the data I collected was more accurate and like less diluted.
Okay, thank you.
If you had more time to do additional background research, what lens or perspective would you focus on more?
I definitely would focus on cultural perspectives of how sibling dynamics affect each other, because there are some cultures that are individualistic while others are basically like it takes a village to raise them. So I think that if I were to focus on that, or if I had more time, I would have focused on that and implemented the idea that some siblings feel the need to parent their own siblings as if they were their children based on their parents' parenting, and that also bleeds into how culture affects parenting and sibling dynamics.
What part of the research process did you find the easiest? Was this something you were anticipating would be easy?
I found it easiest to review and like compare the traits, because I found it interesting how some traits that I wouldn't expect to be, well, I'm the oldest and the youngest because my parents are divorced, but that also kind of makes me a middle child because I'm like in the middle of all the ages. So some traits that I wouldn't perceive my older siblings to have were on there, like lazy. I've always seen my older siblings as really hardworking, and they've always like set an example for me. And as like the second batch of oldest, I can see how I'm a little lazy, but I wouldn't expect first older siblings to be perceived as lazy.
Any other questions from the floor at all? All right, thank you very much.